Child sex trafficking statute in Arizona, what you need to know. For one, there has been a major change in the law most recently. It was a voter-led change in the law associated with the sentencing exposure for child sex trafficking for obvious reasons. Obviously, if a child was legitimately sex trafficked, if a real child was legitimately sex trafficked, the voters now approved and voted for people going to prison for life without exception, okay? No suspension of their sentence. So that is a massive change in the law. The majority of the sex trafficking cases that we have seen throughout our extensive experience in these types of cases are just undercover operations. We do not see often legitimate sex trafficking. We see undercover operations, undercover stings, where an undercover officer claims that they're engaged in a conversation with an individual who is alleged to have been trying to procure sex from them for money, or even just try to procure sex in general. But in this case, sex for money for the child sex trafficking statute. And at some point during the conversation, whether it be online or via text, this undercover officer claims that they're under a certain age, right? And then the person accused shows up to try to engage in the sex act, potentially knowing that who they're speaking with is allegedly underage. We are seeing those cases charged as life in prison cases. So you don't actually have to engage in taking a child, kidnapping a child, and putting them out on the street and forcing them to engage in prostitution. That is not what we're seeing. We are seeing a ton of undercover operations where it's an undercover officer who's setting this entire thing up, and the person is then facing life in prison. It used to be that individuals were typically just charged with luring a minor, which has a different sentencing structure. You are looking at obviously still very extensive trial exposure in prison if you're sentenced on the luring or aggravated luring type of statute. But there's been a real big push, and I think there's a reason for that. I think there's got to be some statistical basis why these county attorney offices are pushing these, and law enforcement are also pushing these types of prosecutions. There's funding, federal funding, state funding associated with child sex trafficking, and I don't think that the statistics that they're reporting to get the type of funding differentiate between undercover operations versus real, actual child sex trafficking. So there's been an aggressive push on the front of child sex trafficking prosecution. The types of pleas that we're seeing in these cases are mandatory prison pleas. Significant time in prison. Obviously, if there's no good factual issue to argue at trial or no type of pretrial constitutional violation, the government is sticking by their plea offers of significant prison time. Again, I think there's some motivations for it. Obviously, there could be some good reasons, but I think there are some other motivations that need to be considered. We have extensive experience litigating these cases. We have extensive experience saving our clients from life in prison sentences. If you want to hire someone who knows how to handle sex crimes, call a lawyer who actually focuses on sex crimes. We're here to help.